we're going to talk about how you should be presenting you and your data first. So sort of flipping it all on its head really, but we think that you guys can probably deal with that. So the first talk is going to be about how to present you and your data, because you're not just showing your data, you're trying to show yourself. This is your opportunity when you've got a presentation to give yourself a little boost. So, why and when? Why do we bother giving presentations? Well, we have to do it all the time. I probably give about 50 to 100 presentations a year. I'm sure these guys do too. It's to present your results. You have to do it in job interviews. You've got to pitch for grant money. And also when you have to do it when you come to a young investigator meeting, because each one of you has dropped us a little presentation, and each one of you will be standing up here with this clicker in their hand, giving us a couple of minutes about you. So think about that. That is all coming up, and we'll get you running on that fairly quickly. So why and when? All the time is the upshot. If you're going to have a career in science and medicine, you're going to be presenting all the time. This is my daughter. She was 7 in this picture, and she's doing a little presentation. They start them early nowadays. She was doing a presentation on the Olympics at school. So there is no time. There's no time to get started on this. You've got to get cracking from a very early age. So, what do you need to think about when you're doing a presentation? You need to think about what it is you're trying to say. What is the point of the presentation? Why are you giving it? Who are you giving it to? These are really important considerations. It's not okay to just brain fart your thoughts all across a page. You need to think about why you're giving the presentation and what point you're trying to make. Think about the environment you're going to be giving it in. Are you giving it in a small room like this, or are you giving it in a 3,000 lecture theatre at UEGW? All right? These are really important things because that's going to decide how you set your data up, how you set your slides up. And then critically, think about what visual aids and what delivery mechanism you're going to be able to do it. Are you going to have a lectern to stand in front of? Are you going to be looking at your talk and using a clicker? All of these things you should consider when you're writing your presentation, because actually thinking about the presentation as you're writing it and delivering it is really important. So when you're writing the talk, remember that this is a communication exercise. You're not there to just stand in front of people, get it over and done with, splurge your talk out, and then walk off. You're there to try and communicate you and your data in a meaningful way. So the general rule is tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them, and then tell them what you've told them. Come and take a seat. Sorry. Welcome. So a good rule of thumb would be to start perhaps with a little box of saying what you're going to say within this talk. So are you going to, if it's a 10-minute talk, are you going to then lay out what the mix of the slides is, what actual key messages you're going to say. Then you deliver those messages, and then at the end you sum them up. All right. So there should be a summary slide in every single presentation that you give, because that's how you ram home the key points that you want to deliver. And you should only really be having 2 or 3 key points for each presentation. One of my sort of key bugbears is that people declutter their slides. So I don't know if anyone's seen this sort of slide that you go to a talk and somebody puts up a slide and then it whizzes in and out and disappears or spins around and shoots out. I find those sorts of things really distracting. You're trying to deliver some data or a message across. Having things that whir in and out or slip off or have great huge amounts of stuff all over them like this, UEG education, transfer certificate, Oxford, this picture in the middle, then all of this data at the bottom, it's all really distracting. You're trying to deliver a message in the box like this. So declutter your slides. And I don't personally like complex slide transitions. I don't know what my colleagues think.
The simpler the better.
The simpler the better. There we go. Great message. So, when you're writing the talk, think about what it is you're going to say. All right? So that's the first thing. Before you put your fingers on the keyboard, what is it you're going to say? State your aims. Have a few key points, and not too many for a presentation, really, because you want to be able to be comprehensive in delivering the message that you've got, and then sum everything up at the end with a summary slide. Set the scene. You're an expert in your field, or you will be. You'll know a lot more about what you're talking about generally than the audience. So it's really important that you lay the groundwork for what you're trying to say. If you start on your complex data without having set the scene, your audience will be lost. And when your audience is lost, it's very hard to pull them back again. All right? So set the scene. Don't assume that everyone has the same level of knowledge as you. And when I'm doing this, I really do try to use a picture, because I think a picture paints, it's very true that a picture paints 1,000 words. Here is the essence of my research in bullet point form. So I could sit here, if you like, and go, the intestinal crypt is the basic functional unit of the gut. Crypts are divided into stem, trans-amplifying, differentiating. And it's really boring, all right? Really boring to read through that for the audience, okay? What's much more useful is to put a picture up like this, and then to describe the picture in as long as you need about what it's showing. So here is the intestinal crypt, here are the stem cells, these are the signalling pathways that control the flow of cells up the crypt. So a picture helps the audience grab their attention, it gets them focused on what you're trying to say, and you haven't bored them in the first slide. Alright, so really important to use pictures. Generally, when I'm trying to give a talk, I try to have as minimal writing as possible. I like pictures and I like to talk around pictures. This is another bugbear of mine. I can't bear it when people have slides where they've crammed about 1 million pieces of data into one slide. It's too much. Okay, here is an example of that. Here is here is probably a year's worth of work. There is some mouse work. Here's a Western blot. Here are some organoids. Here is some transcriptome data. It's too much information. It saturates the slide, and I can't make head or tail of it, and I understand the work. So if you have to sit there and explain every single one of the panels on this very, very complex slide, you're going to bore your audience. So I think keep each slide simple, easy to look at, easy to understand, because the message that you're trying to transmit across is really important. It's really important that it's clear and succinct. And this is another one of my bugbears. You hear this a lot, and you hear this a lot in big conferences. I know this is a busy slide, but, and then they deliver the busy slide anyway. Who can see that at the back? How much data, how much of that data can you see? Anything? Can you see that number there, for example? So if you're trying to make a point about these numbers on this slide, it's absolutely pointless to stick that up, because you can't do it. You can't deliver information out of this slide in any meaningful way. So I think it's a crime when somebody says, I know this is a busy slide, but it happens all the time, and you'll see people doing that. If it's a busy slide, declutter it, simplify it, make the message easy to deliver. Timing. So, when I'm writing a talk, you've got that 10-minute slot at UEGW. It's your UEG week. It's your first big talk. You've got great data. You've got in for a talk, which is no mean achievement. How are you going to deliver it? How are you going to get that message across? You're not going to write 36 slides and then go through it. It just doesn't work. Okay? About a slide a minute is a rough guide. So if you've got a 10-minute talk, you've got to set the scene, you've got to tell them what you're going to tell them, you've then got to tell them, and then you've got to tell them what you've told them, all in about 10 slides. Alright, so the message has to be simple, and it has to be decluttered. So we're coming back to the same themes here. Don't rush them, about a slide a minute, don't let it take too much longer, because if you overrun, your chairman is going to go ding, ding, ding. You'll see this red light on the dais in front of you go red, and it's horrible, because then you start to fluster and sweat, and then you're rushing, and every point that you want to make is badly delivered. So I think set yourself up properly, give yourself enough time, give yourself the ability to explain your science comprehensively, and I would say probably about a slide a minute is about right. Right, planning and preparation prevents piss-poor performance. I think this is absolutely right. Has anyone given talks at UEG Week or ECHO or any of the big European meetings? Any hands up? One at the back there, congratulations. Really good. And you as well? Fantastic. Really good. So, I mean, that's sort of, this level of your career, giving these sorts of presentations is a real achievement, because the abstracts are very competitive. So you've got this great talk, it's going to improve your career, it's going to look great on your CV, you really want to do a good job of it, alright? So don't start doing the slides on the plane on the way over to Vienna or Barcelona, okay? That's not the time to be doing it. Think about what you're going to say, write the slides well in advance, and practice. Alright? Practice, practice, practice. So do it to your partner. until they're bored stiff of it. Do it to the dog. Do it on camera. Do it on Facebook Live. Do it wherever you want to do it, but just practice it so that it's slick, that the timings are good, you're not going to overrun, you're not going to rush, that the message you want to deliver can be delivered properly. All right, so practice makes perfect, and I think that's absolutely true in this circumstance. And a sort of key thing I'd like to do when I've got a presentation, especially if it's one that I'm doing that I haven't done before, is to get that first slide in your head, because once you know your data, you guys know your data better than anybody. So once you deliver that first slide and you've got that flow going, actually thereafter it becomes a lot easier and sort of muscle memory kicks in and you can move forward very easily. But that first slide is the biggest risk point. It's the point that you stand there and go, what am I going to say? That's the kind of brain stutter that you want to avoid. So really practicing and knowing your first slide allows you to slip into the flow of the presentation. And once you've practiced loads and loads and loads, then of course that first slide kicks you off and then you just walk through it in a simple way. So, on the day, the big day arrives, your first UEG week. Very, very important to get your slides uploaded properly. Most big conferences will have a slide presentation room. Go there well in advance, get the data uploaded and check it. Because I don't know how many of you use Macs, and then you've had that problem when you use a Mac and you go to the PC and all your pictures turn into big red crosses. It's a complete disaster. So I think make sure that your slides haven't uploaded badly, that there's no upload disasters, that you've not got some sort of problem that you need to fix in advance. Try and get it uploaded well in advance of your talk, day before or the morning before an afternoon one. All right, check your slides. I think it's always a really good idea to introduce yourself to the chairperson. So there will be, in any talk, there'll be a couple of chair people that will be there 5 or 10 minutes before the session. And if you go up and say, oh, hello, I'm talk number 3, I'll be sitting over there, you just look my way. Because the chairman will then, when chairman or chairwoman, sorry, when he or she introduces the session.
Chairman is simplifying etymologically. In any contraction, that means person, so that is actually right.
Thank you very much. So, chairman, when the chairman says, right, we've got talk number 3, it's person X from Bratislava, and they're looking over and you're sitting there and you're walking up. So I think they then know who you are, they know where you're sitting, everything looks a bit slicker, and of course if you're introducing yourself to the chairman at UEG Week, they're likely to be a fairly big expert in your field, and if they love your data, they might just remember your name and your face from having given that talk. So really good to just put yourself out there. Check the tools. So do you have a clicker? Have you got a dais in front of you and you've got to do the button? What's your timing mechanism here? Have you got one of those green, red light things on the front of it? Check what you're going to be able to deliver from, because actually you don't want to get up there and find that nothing works and you're fumbling around for 2 or 3 minutes whilst the audience is gently falling asleep. So, introduce yourself. Really important. This is your opportunity. You've got a stage. Your opportunity to deliver your really fantastic data that you've worked so hard on. So tell everybody who you are. Tell them where you come from. Get them to remember you. Do a little dance if you want to. Perhaps not. Never apologise or depreciate yourself. Never stand up and say, I'm sorry, but I can't do this, or my English isn't so good. That's not true. Don't ever apologise or depreciate yourself. If you've got a presentation at a conference, you've done extremely well to get there, enjoy it. Take a deep breath and go. And because you know your first slide, and you've practiced it over and over again with the dog and the camera and the partner and what have you, it then just falls into place and off you go. Face the audience, really important. I mean, again, you've probably seen people who stand there and read their data off the slide, just read sentence after sentence, perhaps using a pointer to actually sort of say, face the audience, don't talk to the slide. We never see their face. You've got to look at your audience, you've got to get eye contact with them. Then you can sort of make the one falling asleep at the back feel guilty, you can make the one who's looking at you and looks really interested, you can make eye contact with them, and that's great because that's the sort of interaction that we all like as humans. We like stories, we like narrative, we like to interact with each other. So face the audience, smile, look like you're enjoying it even if you're not, and don't talk to the slide. Hands on the lectern if you've got one. Keep your hand. Some people like to use their hands to express themselves, and that's fine. Hands are fine wherever they are, but just not like this. Not slumping around or you know, sort of looking like you're in utter misery, or perhaps cradling yourself, rocking on the floor. You know, hands are useful because they help to emphasise points, but we don't want to see them waving all over the place or stuck in your pockets. And I've put this, don't sway or rock. I mean, it's a little bit of exaggeration, but I think, you know, there is that always that fear that you might get stuck and then you just sort of collapse in on yourself. Don't let that happen, because you've practiced your slides, you know your data better than most of the audience, and you've just got to convince them of your story. Project your voice. There's no point in mumbling. You can't sit there and read your data off a piece of paper and mumble into the microphone, because no one will hear you and no one will be very interested either. Be careful with the speed, not too fast, not too slow. You don't want to be overrunning your presentation, but similarly, you don't want to gabble the whole lot out as well. And be careful with monotony. So sometimes a very dull presentational technique to just get through it is to read the whole thing from a pre-prepared piece of paper, but that can come across as quite monotonous. And then, of course, if you might be presenting the best data in the world, but if you can't engage the audience, they're not going to listen. And lots of ahs, ums. I had a colleague where we once counted when he was a nervous presenter, but he gave about 36 ahs, word nerves within a sort of 5-minute presentation, and it was a little bit distracting, I have to say, mainly because we were counting them rather than listening to what he was saying. And I think there is this thing about not reading out your slides, and this is why I like to use images, because I think if you've got an image, you can talk around it. You don't have to sit there and read it out. You talk around the image, you can then project the story across. So I like images. It's difficult in a talk like this, but I quite like images to talk around, and most of my talks, if anyone ever sees one, will largely be image-based.
Yeah, I agree, but you typically need to practice even more, right, when you have only or mostly images in your talk, because you don't have any reference whatsoever in terms of text on your slide. I totally agree with you, but especially for beginning presenters, you need to practice even more when you try to center your talk around images, which I would indeed encourage you to do, but practice even more. Yeah,
and it may be something that you move to as you get more experience with presenting, and that's perfectly fine, not a problem. Your speaking style will evolve as you do it more. As I say, I do about 50 to 100 a year, and I'm sure you guys do as well. But this will, that comes. You start to do a lot more presentations the more you move into your career. Ending on time is really important. I mean, I'm sure we've all been to meetings where the chairman has had to stop somebody. It's really embarrassing, or they have to flick through the last 5 slides, and that's really embarrassing as well. And the message is never gets across well if you don't end on time. And prepare your closing sentence. You've done your summary slide, you've told everybody what you've told them, you've summarised it nicely, say thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions. So that the people in your audience know that your presentation is over, and then that's their cue for riotous applause, perhaps even a standing ovation. Questions? Who's scared about questions? A couple of hands went straight up there. I think questions, again, that's something that you can move into. I think questions can be a really good opportunity to interact with the people in the audience. Sometimes they can be aggressive. It's unusual, in truth. I think most people in an audience, if your data is good and they enjoyed it, they want to question you because they're interested in it. Questions are often a sign that your presentation has gone down rather well. If you sit there and it's like a sort of, a bit of tumbleweed rolls across the floor when you've finished your talk, then perhaps you've not delivered a message that was particularly engaging. If suddenly you've got a sea of hands, then actually you've delivered a really interesting and engaging presentation, even if somebody wants to stand up and have a go at you about your data, which I have to say is very unusual. Very unusual. Give a concise answer. No point in rambling on for another 10 minutes because the chairman's just going to stop you. So give the answer if you know it. And if you don't, if you want to talk about it more, you can always seek out the questioner at the end of the meeting. It's okay not to know. It's okay to say I don't know. We don't hear enough of that sometimes in this world, certainly from British politicians. It's okay not to know the answer to a question, all right? And it's okay to say that you don't know, and say, oh, that's a really good idea, perhaps that's an experiment we should think about. And I have to say, this is an absolute classic, never bullshit, because it always comes across that you're bullshitting. and then you look like a bit of a wally. Because if you don't know the answer, just say I don't know. Don't make something up.
You quite often, in a conference situation, will get a particular person in the audience who isn't asking a question, but is making a very long-winded comment. And it's really good to cut that person off and say, thank you so much for your comment, I'll take that on board. Is there anybody else who has another question? Because you don't need to engage with those people who are usually doing it for their own ego, just to make sure everyone's seeing that they're there and they've got something to say. Then you'll spot them very easily when you're up on the rostrum giving a presentation.
Typically senior male professors.
Yeah, usually.
That's a good way of handling this. I like your suggestion. Yeah.
Perhaps UEG should sort of point them out and put a sort of dunce hat on.
Yeah.
You know who's going to be the bullshit artist.
But generally, I think gastroenterology is a quite friendly
I
field.
completely agree.
I mean, there's other fields that are a lot more, cutthroat.
I completely agree. I don't think I've ever had a very unpleasant
No.
experience at any gastroenterology conference I've been to. So, what if it goes very wrong? Okay, so this is when you stand up, and here we go. Look, in preparing for his big speech, Thornton practices freezing mindlessly in front of a mirror. You know, this can happen. So if this can happen, you get up there, you're nervous. It's your first time. You're not clear. You're happy with your data, but you're not sure that you know how to deliver it in a way that's important. It can happen. On the whole, the audience is going to be kind and gentle and sympathetic because everybody remembers when they were giving their first talks or talks at a conference, and their mind went blank as well. So people will generally be sympathetic. They're not all looking at you and laughing. And because you spent hours practicing your talk in front of the dog and the camera and the partner, actually you do have it in there, so you just need to take a breath, reset, remember that first slide, you've got your slide there to prompt you, and start again. Alright, so don't just sort of run off or perhaps sit with your cradling your head in your hands and rocking. It does happen, people will generally be sympathetic, and if you reset, because you've practiced, you know what you're doing, it will all restart. So it can happen, it happens to most of us at some points. It's embarrassing, but actually the audience is generally on your side. So, over to you. All right, you've each sent us